Hello and welcome to my review for Voice of Cards The Isle Dragon Roars. All the gameplay in this video was captured on a PlayStation 5 via backwards compatibility, but the game's also available for PS4, Nintendo Switch and PC right now. Plus there's also a demo available if you want to try it out for yourself. Remember, if you enjoy this video or find it useful, please do consider subscribing to the channel for more content like this. So what is Voice of Cards? Well, it's a turn-based JRPG that uses cards to represent pretty much everything you see in the game. Your party members are cards, your weapons are cards, the NPCs are cards, and even the world you explore is made of cards. The story of the game is a large part of the experience, and as such, the game is heavily driven by its narrative. Of course, I won't be spoiling any of the story here as it's quite important to a title like this, and the gameplay you're seeing is from the very early parts of the game. However, I do think it's worth noting that the game's director was actually Yoko Taro. That name may sound familiar as he's also the director of the Drakengard series and its spin-off series Nier. In fact, this game was produced by several veterans of those games who worked with Yoko Taro for many years. However, the mobile game developer Alim was responsible for the majority of the work with the input and guidance of Yoko Taro's team. During the demo version of the game, you played as 3 members of the Ivory Order, and the beginning of this game is the same in that respect. However, control is very quickly shifted away from them and to a new group of characters. And again, I won't spoil the events of how and why this happens. But after gaining control of this new group, you'll be introduced to the main protagonist and his monster companion named Ma. Very soon after that, you'll meet the 3rd member of your team, and as you progress throughout the game, you'll meet a wide range of characters and NPCs, some of which can be recruited into your party. Your main party can only contain 3 members who will head into battle, but you can openly switch them in and out of the main group and the reserve group. Another thing to note is the story cards, which each give you a small amount of background information on the various characters and monsters that you meet during your journey. There's 2 sides to these story cards, and sometimes they may seem relatively tame until you unlock the flip side of the card, which can turn rather dark rather quickly. The entire game is voiced by one voice actor who serves as the narrator of the story. He doesn't put on a voice for the other characters or anything like that. Instead, he speaks in the same voice for everyone, but he does speak all of their lines.
There he is, or there you are, I should say, the hero of our tale. A humble bounty hunter. You love little in this realm more than coin.
Gameplay-wise, you have 2 main sections of play, the overworld and the battle screen. The overworld acts much like it does in older Final Fantasy games or perhaps Dragon Quest. You explore the world one space or one card at a time using this game piece that you see here, and there's always a chance that you'll get into a random battle. As you explore the overworld and fight monsters, you'll come across towns and other areas that you can enter simply by stepping on the appropriate card. Once you've entered one of these areas, you'll usually find some NPCs to talk to and services you can use, like an armorer, an item shop, and an inn that you can rest at overnight to recover your HP. And if you decide to go and check out the armorer, you can buy gear for your party members with the gold that you've acquired from your adventures. Each character in your party can be equipped with 1 weapon, 1 armor set, and 1 ring. As you might expect, some items grant helpful effects and they all improve the stats of the characters, although some may lower other stats to compensate, such as wearing a big suit of armor that increases your character's defense, but then lowers their speed. This means they can potentially soak up more damage but won't be able to attack until later in the turn. The game doesn't really feature random drops from enemies except for health potions and things like that. You can't really find weapons or armor dropped from enemies and are instead supposed to buy new armor and gear from each town as you progress through the game. As you explore the world, you'll often have to fight in random encounters which will take you to the battle screen. On this screen you'll see your party at the bottom and the enemies at the top. It's a turn-based battle system that uses gems to perform some of the more powerful attacks. Gems are generated at the start of each of your character's actions, so when it's that character's turn to attack, they will always generate 1 gem. You can of course use a basic attack that doesn't use up a gem or pass your turn, which allows you to save gems up for stronger attacks. On the battle screen, each card shows 3 numbers. The number on the left with the sword symbol is the attack power, then the number on the right with the shield symbol is the defense, and the middle number in the red orb is the character's HP or health. This probably goes without saying, but as you kill monsters, you'll gain XP, which levels up your characters and increases these stats. The attacks you can perform range from basic attacks that don't use gems to healing spells to attacks that hit multiple enemies or inflict ailments. Ailments are your standard poison or frozen kind of effects. Some attacks actually rely on in-game dice rolls which govern things like extra damage or the success of applying an ailment to an enemy. During battle, you can also press a button to bring up an inventory screen and heal using a potion in the same way that you would in something like Persona or Pokemon. Some enemies in the game will also take extra damage or reduce damage depending on if they are weak or resistant to the element of that attack. Some attacks don't actually have an element tied to them, but a lot of them do, and it works as you'd expect with lightning being strong against water, for example. And really, overall, the game is actually kinda simple and straightforward, so you should now have a decent idea of what to expect from it. So now I'll give you my personal opinions on what I liked and didn't like about the game. And remember, this isn't an exhaustive list, this is just a few things that stood out to me, both positive and negative. And with that said, let's start with the positives. So first off, I really did enjoy the demo and I was really looking forward to the full game. And I have to say that I wasn't disappointed. In fact, for me, personally, I found it to be even better than I thought it would be. Once again, not spoiling anything, but the story and the way it was told just really kind of hooked me. You know, it's like when you start reading a book and you just can't put it down, you know, just one more page, that kind of thing. That's just how I felt. It was just so intriguing and just expertly written, at least as far as I'm concerned. There were parts that I found to be surprisingly dark narratively, and some sections were actually quite heartfelt and even sad. Without trying to go over the top, I was almost hanging on every word that was said in the story, and I genuinely want this team to make a sequel, but perhaps not a direct one. Maybe they could do a new story in a different world with a new theme and new characters. I mean, if that were to happen, I would be first in line, I can assure you. And you know, ever since I was a kid, I've really loved the anime and manga aesthetic in games, and of course in the actual anime and manga. I've also played a lot of anime style games over the years, and the artwork in this game is right up there with some of the best for me. The fact that I cared so much about the story and the characters is, I think, a shining endorsement of the quality that this game puts on display in virtually every area. From story to art to gameplay to music, I just really enjoyed pretty much every part of it. In fact, I really hope this game gets some kind of physical release down the line, and honestly, I'm actually kind of surprised that it didn't. I mean, a collector's edition with some really high quality cards of the playable characters with sort of gold stamped foiling would have just been brilliant. Maybe even a replica of the game piece that you control during the game, and a couple of gems and some dice, plus a cool art book. That would have been a really great collector's edition. And as I'm saying this, I'm actually kind of disappointed that this isn't a thing, but hey, we can't all get what we want, can we? And I personally think that the combat system is made very well indeed. It has what I want from a game like this. It's simple to understand and learn and pretty much play immediately, which I really appreciated. Nothing ever felt overpowered on my side or too difficult to defeat on the other side, and everything seemed really well balanced for a casual player such as myself. And don't get me wrong, I've played trading card games for around 25 years, including Yu-Gi-Oh!, Pokemon, Magic, Vanguard, the Power Rangers card game, and pretty much everything in between. So it kind of goes without saying that I'm not a stranger to complexity in card games, but you know, sometimes I just want to play and not have to worry too much about 1,000 different rules. And the reason the game does this is actually kind of meta in a way. To some of you, it's probably quite obvious, but I guarantee a lot of people will look at this game from afar, perhaps a screenshot or something like that, and say, oh yeah, you know, I'm not really into card games or card battlers. Well, that's not what the game actually is, it just kind of looks like one. It's literally a normal turn-based JRPG, with everything being represented by cards. You could easily swap out all the cards for, you know, 2D and 3D models, and it would function just as well on a technical and gameplay level. One thing I really enjoyed was how the game played out like a Dungeons and Dragons game, or perhaps a choose your own adventure book. Quite often as you play through the game, you'll stumble across these random events which allow you to choose a response, and you'll get a different outcome depending on what you choose. I will admit some of these did repeat after a while, but I decided to test it out and I found that each response does have a few different outcomes, so that's something. I think it's good that it isn't just the same each and every time, although the more time you spend in that area, the more likely you are to see it all repeated. Obviously the repetition isn't a huge deal, but I just appreciated that there was more than one outcome for each choice. Some of these events do ultimately give you the same outcome, which could be something like a certain amount of gold, for example. But usually the amount of gold and the narrative around it will be different, which is a nice little touch, I think. And lastly, performance-wise, I had literally zero issues with this game. Of course, the game isn't very demanding, especially on a PS5 or a high-end PC, but still, my experience was crash, glitch, and bug-free. And so now you know what I liked about the game, so let's talk about what I didn't like in the negative section. As you can probably tell, I really did enjoy this game, but it isn't perfect. I mean, technically nothing is, right? But as they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Although truthfully, I don't really have that many negatives myself, and the ones that I do have are pretty minor. So what I'll do is try to predict what some other players might have an issue with, as well as giving you my own opinions. So I mentioned earlier that the enemies have an element attached to them, and so do a lot of the attacks that your characters can perform. I don't really have an issue with that exactly on its own, but when you're in battle, the enemies don't have any kind of symbol on their card that shows you what type they are. Again, it's a very minor thing, and obviously over time you do start to remember which creature is weak to what element, but when you fight something you've never seen before, you don't really have a lot of way of knowing for sure what it is. The artwork does sometimes give it away, but not always. I just think it would be such an easy thing to add, and there's almost always a lot of free space at the top right and left of the enemy cards. And keeping in line with my minor issues, I did feel that the menus were quite sluggish, but it's not due to a technical problem with the game. It's actually because each time you open a menu or move around within the menus, the cards have this kind of quick animation that has to play out, and what that means is it takes a few extra seconds to do anything that you want to do. It's not really that bad on its own, but it does mount up when you're trying to do a lot of changes to your party in one go. It's quite noticeable when bringing up the start menu and in the stores especially, but it happens pretty much everywhere in the game and just doesn't feel that great. A couple of these animations can be skipped, but most can't. Again, not much of a problem, but it is something to note. In regards to what other players might think, I would say that if you're looking for some sort of challenge, this game will not give you what you're looking for. It doesn't have any difficulty settings, and I felt that the game was pretty easy as JRPGs go. For me, this isn't an issue. I used to play games on higher difficulties as a teenager, but nowadays, I just tend to enjoy the ride and play on normal or easy. Thing is though, I know that a lot of people who play JRPGs like there to be some sort of strategy or challenge to their games, and this one just doesn't really have much room for that. As I said, that's absolutely fine for me, but it might not be for you, so I thought it was worth talking about. Similarly, the game isn't actually that long, clocking in at only around 10 to 14 hours depending on if you rush through it or if you play casually and take your time. The game's priced at £25 or around $30, so I suppose that does make sense. But again, if you're a hardcore JRPG fan who wants 100 hours of content, this simply doesn't have it. Once again, for me, I'm okay with it as I don't always want my games to go on for that long, but I know that's not how everyone feels, so I thought again it was worth mentioning. And as you can probably tell, I genuinely struggled to find much I didn't like with this game, so I think it's time to move on to the conclusion and recommendation section. In my opinion, Voice of Cards is a meaningful, well-written, expertly designed JRPG that, while short, packs a lot of quality into its 10 to 14 hour runtime. It does have some very minor issues and some shortcomings when compared to other, larger JRPGs, but I would still feel confident recommending it to pretty much anyone. Of course, if you're someone who hates turn-based combat, then it's probably not going to be for you. But what I mean is, if you're someone who's seen this game advertised and you were even slightly interested in playing it, I would definitely recommend it and say it's worth playing. And remember, there is a demo available as well, so even if you're still unsure about the game, you can try it out for free. And I will just mention that the game does have some paid DLC. It's pretty cheap, coming in at around 79 pence or $1 for most of it, or you can grab all the items in a bundle. It's all just cosmetic stuff like skins for the dice and the game piece and cards, but again, I don't really feel like this was necessary. I would have preferred that the game maybe be, I don't know, £3 or $5 more expensive and just have it all be included, or better yet, just include it all in the game. If this kind of thing doesn't bother you, feel free to ignore what I just said, but it bothers me, and I know it bothers other players as well, so I wanted to mention it. But ultimately, it's probably one of the most engaging RPGs I've played in a while, and it's all the more impressive when you consider how it presents itself. It's just able to convey so much with so little, and even though I said I didn't mind the game being so short, I'm actually finding myself wanting more and more. So there you go, that's my review of Voice of Cards The Isle Dragon Roars. It's available right now for PS4, PS5 via backwards compatibility, Nintendo Switch and PC. As I've said, a demo is available, so please do give it a try if you're interested. Also, apologies for being a little bit late on this review. I haven't really had much to review for the last few weeks, and now I've got about 4 or 5 to do at once, but rest assured, more content is always on the way. If you have any questions, or perhaps there was something I missed that you'd like to know about, please feel free to leave a comment and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. If you enjoyed the video or found it useful, I hope today will be the day that I earn your subscription, and if you want to support the channel even further, all the important links are in the video description down below. But with all that said, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.